Hello, my name is Sheila and I would like to welcome you to my podcast, All About You. I love to listen to podcasts and especially conversations with famous people. However, I think everyone has a story to tell. Maybe a place you have visited, a hobby you enjoy, or anything that you feel would be of interest. I want to have conversations with lots of different people and hear their stories. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on my email, allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com. Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. And today, my guest is Simon Osamoh, who is currently in Minnesota in the US. So, Simon, welcome to the All About You podcast.
Sheila, an absolute honour and privilege to be here. Really excited for this conversation today. I know we've got some really interesting topics for your listeners.
The thing is, you wear so many hats. So rather than me trying to cover everything, can you introduce yourself, please?
I can, and I should say these are self-created hats as well, Sheila. I don't know if I should have quite so many. I've created them, but I like to say I'm a Brit living in Minnesota in the Midwest in America. I've been here for around 10 years. In the UK, I spent just short of 14 years in law enforcement. I started as a Bobby on the beat to becoming a detective, getting into organised crime, and then did some terrorism work, and then left as a sergeant in 2011. And my wife is American, so that's what took me to America. And then in America, I had to go through a bit of a period of transformation, really, and rediscovery, Sheila. I started in charge of counterterrorism at Mall of America, Minnesota, which is North America's largest shopping mall, entertainment complex. That's around 6-7 million square feet, to put that into context for people in the UK. It is a large place. A sort of known terrorist target. A lot of dedicated security goes into keeping that building safe. And I'm also a Christian, and I drifted into non-profit safety and security around church. But a lot of churches are soft targets, don't have much security, but open door, all inviting. So I do a lot of work with non-profits and churches about how to keep their buildings safe. And through that, I've authored 2 books. I have 2 companies aimed at non-profit security, and there's so many different things that I do. Yeah, and also I have a podcast as well, who became podcast. So no matter where you want to go, there's different things. Or I create too much work for myself, but as a sort of an elevator pitch for your listeners, a little bit about who I am.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. You've done a far better intro than I could ever do. We seem to have, in general, a bit of a macabre interest in the police, in crime, and investigations. So when I saw in your information that you'd been a detective in the UK, I thought that is absolutely perfect. So Simon, let's concentrate on that particular hat of yours. So when you were a kid, did you want to be a Bobby on the beat? Because that's when we sort of first become aware of, as kids, isn't it? Bobby's on the beat.
Well, it's interesting as well. I think I was around 14 or 15. You know, you have like these career sessions, don't you? Or someone really starts having those conversations. You know, what is it you want to do when you grow up? And I think I've got to say that if you look at my the parents' evening and the feedback that I was getting, most of my teachers might have said this person would be on the wrong side of the law, not necessarily commended for his investigations work. You know, and I think that is also interesting with the mindset, Sheila, as well, between those police officers and the sort of criminals that you sort of go looking for. But I think maybe I was around 14, 15, where I really had a sort of a strong passion and an interest in it. You know, I'm a very strong people person. I love to hear people's stories, to understand who they are, how they got where they are. And I think part of because of my own upbringing as well, I was sort of a champion for the underdogs. I think that's where it really sort of started to resonate with. I had no idea, being a 14 or 15-year-old kid, some of the magnitude of some of the things that I'd then gone to achieve in law enforcement. I was very, very blessed for sure.
I mean, the police force is not a particularly easy occupation to break into. I mean, as well as having a very good education record, you have to be physically fit, you have to have good morals, you have to have a lot of sort of self-belief and strength in yourself as a human being. So once you sort of decided what you wanted to do, it was head down, exams, get good reports from school. Was that the route you decided you were going to go for it?
Yeah, not quite. I mean, there's might be a little bit of a gap in between. So I think, and I should say, I actually joined the police at 19. I think I applied when I was maybe 18 and a half and joined at 19. But I did, when I left school, I did a national diploma in public services for people interested in going into, sort of public service positions. So that's mostly when I really got my head down and thought, okay, this is something perhaps that I want to pursue. But I want to pick up on something that you said about the police, and it really is, and I truly believe this, but there is a type of aptitude that you have for the type of work. And I'll tell you the reason being is that when danger occurs, you see the headlines in the news. Most people are running away from the danger. Generally, police officers, you're the person that's running to the danger to try and find out what has occurred. So there's a real inquisitive mind. There is a real excitement and a buzz that comes around being and working in law enforcement. It's really hard because people often say, well, what is it? And then you have that term, you say, well, I'll let you know when I see it, and even here in the US, I don't do it as much. I used to lecture to a lot of law enforcement colleges, and I would look out, Sheila, and there could be 40 kids in there. And I was thinking, some of you just don't have the aptitude or the ability to do this type of work. So it is interesting. It is a mindset. It really is a mindset.
I think that's really interesting what you said there, dividing the people that are going to run away from an incident and those that are going to go to it and assess the situation. And that's exactly what the police or medical personnel do. They sort of don't particularly rush forward, but they assess the whole thing and say, okay, what's my immediate action I need to take? So yeah, that's definitely in a mindset. So presumably you went through all the training, which is pretty intense.
Yes, for sure. It's very, very intense. Yeah, I mean, I think even back I joined in 1998, but I remember we did 3 or 4 weeks at Thames Valley Police, was my police department. We did 3 or 4 weeks sort of in-house. Then as a 19-year-old, I went off to a police academy for 10 weeks. I came back, was then tutored by someone at a police station for 5 weeks. Then I went back to the police academy for another 5 weeks, all residential. Then I came back and was then tutored again for a certain period, another 5 or 10 weeks. I forget now how long it was. And then over the next probably 12, 18 months, I did a series of maybe 4 or 5 a month back at what you'd sort of say here in America, the police academy, or back within training. So yeah, your first 2 years of probation, in all honesty, 7 or 8 months of it is just in training. It's very easy for me to be biased, Sheila, because I'm English, but I still believe that's why one of the UK police is seen as the best in the world, because of the investment and the training that goes into law enforcement.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. When you started doing the training, whether it's the academy, whether it was at a police station, did you sort of think, yes, this is exactly what I want to do? Did you really think, yeah, this is it?
Well, and interestingly, so the answer is a lot like yes and no, and I'll tell you the reason why. The work, the interacting, chasing the bad guys, all the role play, I really love that type of stuff. But I was a 19-year-old kid that had spent most of my time trying to get out of school or not do schoolwork. So I wasn't too academic. But what I really discovered in joining the police, and this is still the same now, I'm 43 now, I left the police 10 years ago. I still have a strong core base of friends that are still serving law enforcement, people that are retired. Is that what it gave me, Sheila, was a friendship. It gave me strong family bonds. And I'll be very honest, there's people that I was in the police with, I'm stronger connected than my own brothers or sisters, just because there is that family. So there was a time when I thought, yes, this is really for me. And what helped me get through that were people either more mature than me or later on years in life that could help me academically get through the training program. I couldn't have done it without them. And at the base of it was that family, was that connection, and that sort of belonging to a bigger cause greater than myself, you know.
I can understand that, because I think when you're up against it in something like law enforcement, you're all going through difficult situations and difficult times, maybe all together, you're on a case, or maybe it's separate times, but it's that common bond. You've all got one goal you're going after, is to get the bad guys, but it's having that bond. And I do believe when people are up against it, that's when people come together, and that's when you can make those lifelong bonds. As you say, you regard a lot of those people as very close family.
Yeah, and you see that quite a lot within military as well. People often say, you know, someone goes off to Iraq, Afghanistan, you know, all these things, and bad things happen. And they come back and they say, well, why would you do that? And it's generally because, well, that person would do it for me, you know, and whether it's some overtime that you don't want to do, or go and make an arrest, or put yourself in a potentially harmful situation. A lot of it for me, there's so many people I can name, and I most probably won't because it's not fair to on this podcast, but the reason why I would put others before myself is that I know they would do it for me. And it is that, like I said, it is that being part of a greater cause which is bigger than you. And the hard thing is, you might take us down this, Sheila, as well, is doing it when the public don't always accept what you're doing is for them. You know, that is the hard thing. You know, you're helping people that either don't want to be helped or don't realize that you're doing this for a greater cause bigger than yourself.
And I can imagine that must be very, very hard, because you can see the big picture. This doesn't look as if it's the right thing to do, but in the bigger picture, this is what I need to do so that we can move things on. So I can certainly understand what you're saying there. So let's imagine you've graduated now. So tell us about your first few days, if you can remember back, what it was like. You've got your stripes, you've got your uniform, and you're out in the big wide world now in your uniform. How was it?
Yeah, and it was fun. It was exciting. It really was, and had some big introductions to probably what my life was going to be like. And I remember making my first arrest, but I can remember I was being tutored, which is sort of like, you know, you're sort of a trainee and someone's helping you. And we went to this domestic, and there was, you know, I was a 19-year-old kid, and there was a domestic argument between a husband and a wife, and we got called around the house. And I don't know why, Sheila, but I can remember I just said, you know, generally, someone goes with the wife, someone goes to the husband, and you separate them. And I was talking to the husband, and I don't know what it was. And I just said to him, do you really need a 19-year-old kid around here to sort out your marital problems? You know, but there's got to be a different way to this than shouting, screaming, and all this. And it just stopped him dead, Sheila. I don't think he knew what to say. And he's like, yeah, you're right. He said, I don't really need you around here to sort out my problems. And straight away, a little bit of humor just injected into that situation really de-escalated it. And that's sort of follow on from your earlier question. That's when I knew that I really enjoyed it. You know, had a natural sort of skill and ability to it. And then sort of followed that through. You know, I always treated everyone with the respect that I felt they deserved, not knowing their journey. You know, in those first few weeks, you know, whether you're arresting someone for shoplifting, I tried not to judge them without really knowing what their position was. I grew up in a single parent family, low income, on a council estate, and there's been times when I'd been in a corner shop or something, thought it'd be too easy now just to take something. But that isn't how my mum trained me and educated me. If you want something, you go and work for it. And I realized there are people in life that don't have that guidance, support, and moral compass. And so, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say I tried to be that for them, but I always treated them with respect, not knowing their stories. So my time training was just fun because I was just meeting everyday real people and getting to know them and their journeys and stuff, and having a lot of laughter and fun along the way. You know, it really is. Yeah.
I think with most things, you know, you do the theory, you do the textbook, you do the role play, you do the exams. It's when you actually get out there and greet in your public, whether that is in the police force or whatever, when you're literally let loose to do whatever it is, that's when you really start learning. That's when you think, right, okay, what can I apply that I've learned from this situation? Often it will come naturally. So we talked about you as the young 19-year-old. So let's go a few years on. So how did you offer the role of being a detective?
Yeah, and this is a great story, Sheila. I'm glad that you said that, because there's a gentleman, must be long retired now. I don't give him enough credit for my career as to where it went. But it was, I think he was is either a detective chief superintendent or detective superintendent. I forget what his rank was at the time, but I'd actually applied for a firearms position. And then you needed to have the sort of the area commander for my station had to sign off on your application, and he was out for whatever reason. I was off doing some public order training or somewhere else, and this Melvin Young, he got my application on his desk for the firearms team, and he rang me and said, can you come and see me? I said, well, sir, I'm off out doing his public order training. I can't, but when we finish, I'll gladly come back to the station and see you. And he said, well, I want to talk about your application to the firearms team. So I was going back and all excited, thinking, hey, this is great. And I can remember he sat me down and said, Simon, I think you should go in a different direction. He said, I've watched your work. I've heard good things about you. You've had a really good secondment to the Criminal Investigation Department, CID. I think you should consider being a detective. And I was like, what do you mean, sir? No, that's not in my journey at all. And he said, well, I'd really encourage you to apply for the detective. I'll sign off your application for the firearms team, but I think you should become a detective. And I dismissed it. And my inspector at the time, he came to me a few weeks later and said, Simon, today's the day when the detective positions are going to close. Have you applied? And I said, well, no, sir. He said, why? And I said, well, I've got an interest in firearms. He said, Simon, he said, he wasn't asking you, he was telling you. And I said, oh, okay, I get that now. So a couple of interesting things happened. One, yeah, definitely that changed my trajectory and I made the right decision. But there's a lot of life lessons that I got about law enforcement, Sheila, and the big one there was that he saw something greater in me that I didn't see in myself, and that was a big thing. That he saw something greater in me that I didn't see in myself, and I've never forgot that, and I don't give him enough credit. But I grew up with an absent father. I'd never really had too much male guidance, and that's something that I now try to do with other young men is point out to them and tell them things that I see in them that perhaps they don't see in themselves, to give them that same belief and encouragement.
I think that's a wonderful story, because we often think we see ourselves differently to other people, but that's often in a negative sense. But for somebody to see something in you as a very positive thing, and basically point you gently in the right direction where they can see your strengths, your potential for the future, I think is just fantastic. So what happened next?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to cut a very long story short, we come back in the middle. I mean, my time in the police, I think in my 14 years, I was commended on 8 occasions by the chief of police, which is still a great accomplishment for anyone within law enforcement. So, I have a lot. So obviously, it was me doing a lot of those actions with peers and co-workers. But I have a lot to be grateful for the direction that he pushed me in. But yeah, so from becoming a detective, I worked on sort of burglary teams, robbery teams, and then I was actually in my mid-20s. I think I was 22, 23, Sheila, when I became a detective, very, very young. He saw something in me fantastic, for sure, to get me involved that early. I got into serious and organised crime, which was also a lot of fun. That was doing a lot of covert police tactics now, doing surveillance on people, listing devices, all those things that you sort of see on TV. So that was an interesting time in my career.
When we started this podcast, I said we often have a bit of a macabre interest in the police, in medical TV programs. Why do you think the general public love a crime investigation or a reenactment? What is it about it that we like?
Yeah, I think, that is a great question. And believe it or not, Sheila, I've never been asked that question before. So that is a fantastic question. But I think as humans, we are just fascinated by things that go wrong, or sort of crime and thrill and stuff, aren't we? I think we're just fascinated by it, because you are right. It doesn't matter who you are. Law enforcement officers, police officers, generally, we're the people at the dinner party where someone says, come on, tell us your worst story that you've ever, what's the worst thing that you've ever seen, the worst dead body or the worst criminal. So I think people are fascinated. I've never really come down to one reason why, just other than that we just love that gore, and we just have this sort of fascination with things going wrong in life. Yeah. Oh, what about you? Have you ever wondered why people like it so much?
I think for us particularly, I think, for example, if we look at sort of, I don't know, medical programs, hospital programs, we quite like to see the blood and gore, but from the comfort of our sofa. If we cut our own finger, we just want someone else to deal with it. We can't even look, sort of thing. I mean, when I used to give blood, fine, take as much as you like, but I don't need to see it. And even now, when I have a blood test, but I don't need to know about it. I trust you to do your thing. So I think particularly with the police, when there is a crime, there are so many pieces of a puzzle the police have to put together. There is the actual crime. Let's say someone has done some shoplifting. Okay, this is the fact. They've gone in and they've stolen a bottle of gin, for example. Okay, how did they do it? Why did they do it? Was it a spur of the moment? Was it a planned thing? Did they go in with a big overcoat because they knew what it was going to do? Was there an accomplice with them? Was there someone to make a scene so all the attention would be on that person? I think it's all these little parts of the puzzle maybe we like to try and put together in our own minds while watching the specialists, i.e. the police at work. Maybe that's it. Maybe we're all armchair detectives.
Yeah, and I think everyone has a potential, because it's one of those things that you feel compelled to look. We are gawkers, aren't we? You see a bad accident on the motorway. If someone says don't look, you'll turn your head. You've got to look. You've got to see what's happened. I think there's something in our DNA and chemistry for sure, which dates back perhaps primal age, whatever it is. We have to look, we have to see these things. And also, I don't want to get myself told off on your podcast, but my oldest son is 10. He's going to turn 11 this year. Being a Brit here in America, one of my favorite detectives, Miss Marple. Yeah, my 10-year-old, he loves to watch Miss Marple, and even he's drawn into it. He's a 10-year-old American kid, but I put on a Miss Marple, and he loves to see it and watch it as well. So yeah, it is. There's something inside us, Sheila. We're all addicted to true crime.
But I'm glad you brought up Miss Marple, because if we want to sort of draw battle lines here, we've got the TV cops and robbers programs where it's all blood, gore, slashing, car chases. You're absolutely exhausted. Or there's little Miss Marple lives in the little village. They've got the cottage with roses round the door. And there's a murder. There's always a vicar. There's always sort of the lady who, I don't know, comes to clean the house. Two completely different things. So you've got your slash and burn brigade, and then you've got your Miss Marple, where there is always a crime. And my husband says, because I love Jessica in Murder, She Wrote with Jessica Lansbury.
Right, yes, Jessica Fletcher.
Oh, one of my heroes. I always say when I grow up, I want to be like Jessica Fletcher. My husband says, but you don't want to be friends with her because all her friends die. She always knows the person who owns the hotel. She always knows the person who runs the mansion or something. But I think crime has got many different genres on the TV, hasn't it? We've got all these different types of programs. In real life, we all leave a trail. For every crime scene, there is a trail, whether it's fingerprints, it's forms of DNA, material possessions. Somebody leaves, I don't know, a pen, and you can take fingerprints. Talk us through some of these things where we all leave evidence, we all leave a trail.
I mean, there's the forensic side, there's the DNA and fingerprints, and DNA. It's far more advanced from when I was, in law enforcement, as to what they can do now and to how you can find DNA, from burglaries to rape, murders, all that type of stuff. It is very true that, I think like the crime scene investigators over here, everything leaves a trace. So there's that forensic side. But I think the biggest way I always found to find these criminals is through the money. Follow the trail of money, and it always leads you, because it's interesting that we should never compare ourselves to others in lives. But whether you're a big criminal or a small criminal, everyone needs money to survive. And that was always the easiest way to actually find a criminal. One of my big nemesis, then if we're going to talk about my now friend Michael Long, who I put in prison for 5 years, just finding people through the trail of money, that is the easiest way. Bank accounts, working out where they're spending, just for type of offenses that they're doing. Everything around finances always leaves a trail, because it's how the financial system is set up. So when I was a detective and I would get any type of case, I'd always look first surrounding who is the person. Are they on benefits? Are they working? Where's their finances? I would go all out and get all these court orders to get in their finances, get in the mortgages, because everything revolves around money. It's what, as humans, it's what we crave, and it's also our Achilles heel. So there's many different ways to try and catch a bad person, but money is the easiest way. Follow the money.
So when you're talking about follow the money, we are talking about greed. Somebody wants to commit an offence. I don't know whether it's shoplifting, to buy something, to sell it on, to get half the value in cold hard cash, or a bank robbery, or breaking into somebody's house. People are going after the money, not always the cash, often to steal things to sell for money. So a lot of the stuff is just to do, people need money.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So the guy that I just mentioned, this Michael Long, I think a lot of it comes down to validation as well. So I'll say to my listeners, there was a career criminal that I put in prison for 5 years. When I moved here to America, reached out to him. I heard that he'd turned his life around, and I rang him and said, I'm just ringing to say that I'm proud of you. And it was an interesting conversation, because he really turned his life around. There's some people that don't fully believe that he has, but all he can do is live the best life that he can, put one foot in front of the other. He wrote a book when he was in prison, and his book was called something like There Is a Way Out, something like that, Sheila. And I opened his book, and then the first page of his book was, the line is said something on the lines of, all I ever wanted was to feel validated and accepted by my father, and it never came. And it was a dagger to my heart, because it was a feeling and emotion that I had from having an absent father. And for Michael Long in particular, a lot of what he was chasing through his crime was validation and acceptance among his peers. So he was trying to steal bigger and better things to try and get validation from people that, in all honesty, he didn't need validation from, but that's what he was doing, So it was, I think there is greed, but there's a mindset or a mentality that a lot of these people do it for validation, and they're doing it for acceptance. There's some that are doing it out of circumstance, but I would say the biggest shift is validation and acceptance of the world, looking to be perceived in a certain way, particularly around white collar crime, fraud, deception, thefts, those type of things.
I think that's a very interesting point, because we all really want to belong to and find our tribe. Now, our tribe could be a sports group, a church group, or people you do photography with. He obviously hadn't had much of a male presence in his life, so he was looking for his own tribe, and he obviously got involved with this group, and the more dangerous or the bigger crimes he did would move him up, in theory, into a higher tribe. So that's very interesting when it's talking about he was in the world of crime because of validation of who he was as a person, which is very sad.
It is, and actually, and that's what I actually said to people. And so, here's what I'll also say is that when I'm in America now. I came back to the UK, I think it was 2017, and I met Michael Long. Now, I called him and said, I'm in an airport, I'm in a hotel close to Heathrow. I said, if you have an hour, you can come and see me before I jump on a plane. And he said, wherever you say you are, I'll come, and I want to see you. And he drove to the airport, to this hotel. We met him. He met my two sons. He met my wife. As we're walking out to leave, and he was a career criminal trying to reform himself. He's no angel. He'd say that himself. He's 20 years in and out of incarceration. As we walked away, he said, I can't believe you did that. I said, did what? He said, well, I can't believe that you'd let me meet your family. And I said, well, why not? Do I need to be worried about you in some way? And obviously, I'm not silly. I've met him in a public place and all this type of stuff. But what he was really telling me, Sheila, in that moment is that in his 40s, no one had ever trusted him enough to get in that position, or he still didn't feel trusted in the relationship. And you're right, for me, there's some horrendous things that this man has done in his life. Don't get me wrong, but for me, that was very sad that he felt in that way, that he couldn't be trusted, or that people couldn't trust him, and that isn't for anyone to live their life by.
I would just say that is a very valuable insight into human nature, as in you didn't see him as a threat even after you'd put the guy down and he'd served his sentence. But years and years before, nobody would be prepared to be in a position with him like that.
Since meeting Michael, numerous people have said to me, why do you place faith in this person who's a career criminal? He's most probably still out committing crime. He's a bad guy. Just let it go. And I said to Michael a few years ago, I said, look, even if you get arrested and it's 2:00 in the morning, ring me first and I'll do what I can to help. Because Michael taught me something, Sheila, and maybe this is why I was successful in the police. I don't know, or maybe it's my upbringing. My mum for sure takes part of the credit for this. But I said to myself around that time with Michael, if not me, then who? So when people were saying to me, this is just a bad career criminal, just forget about him, I asked myself, if not me, then who? If I'm not going to place faith in him, who is then going to do that? And I want to tell you a quick story of transformation where I applied that. When I last came back to the UK in 2019, I'd met some friends in London and we had a few drinks, and I was going back to my hotel, and I got off at the tube, and it was maybe probably 11, 12 o'clock at night. I was a little bit drunk. And this guy approached me. Most people would have been in his 20s. Now, he was on crutches, but he didn't look a very respectable guy, Sheila, it's fair to say. And he said, can I have some money? And Sheila, I spent 14 years in the police, organised crime, detective. I'm no fool. And I thought, okay, there's going to be someone coming out of the bushes. I'm going to get robbed, and my senses were just on alert. I was thinking this is a bad situation. And, he was asking for money. And I said to him, look, I don't have money. And I said, I generally don't, because I never carry cash with me. But I said, what I am prepared to do is I said, let's just hold a conversation here. And I said, I'd love to get to know you more. And the reason why I did that was because of the Michael Long, if not me, then who? And I spoke to this young guy, and he was telling me about, his brother had got him addicted onto heroin, I think it was. His leg had gone gangrene. He had to have his leg removed. His parents kicked him out. He ended up on the streets, all this horrible stuff. And I offered him nothing more than just companionship, and like I said, I was drunk and I was just talking to him. And then we spoke for like 20, 30 minutes. He told me all this stuff and he started to cry. And I said, what are you crying for? And he said, well, you're the first person that has ever sort of shown me any attention today and treated me like I'm a real person. And so that transformation of Michael Long created that mindset of, if not me, then who? Ordinarily, I would have just walked past that homeless person at the tube station at 11 o'clock at night. But I decided to say, if not me, then who? If I'm not going to just talk to this person and find out who he is, who is going to do that? And by doing that, not only did me and that man share a moment, but it also gave him hope that there are good people out there. And there was no exchange other than just a connection of emotions where I just listened because he didn't have an outreach. So it is fascinating you ask about what makes a police officer successful. And I think for me, it was just really realizing that at a very early age, that the power of connection. You're not above these people, you're serving these people. And there, for the grace of God, go I. That a different life, that could have been me, and I'd be hoping that someone would give me the respect and dignity. I think that's the difference between a good police officer and some of the exceptional ones that are out there.
I mean, I think that's an amazing story, because not only did you give hope and respected that man at the ground station as a human being, it also made you think about the words from the other person, and it probably made you think, okay, gone from thinking this guy's going to do me over because he wants to take my wallet to actually sitting down and talking. So I think that's a very interesting story in respect of things are not always what they seem, and how that can often happen in a good way.
I mean, I was always fascinated by the criminal mind. You know, I used to love, like me and you, having this conversation, really understanding, yeah, I know you just murdered someone, or I know you've just stolen something, but I really want to hear the backstory as to how did you get here? You know, because it's no one wakes up in one morning and says, hey, I'm going to become a murderer, or I'm going to start, go into high value garages and start stealing Porsches. No one really wakes up and does that. There's a pattern of behavior. There's a lifestyle that gets them to there. And I was always fascinated as to how they did it. For me, that's really where I used to get my excitement. A lot of people used to love charging people in the custody suite of the police station. For me, it's when we'd go to Crown Court and they've just been found guilty, and I would just turn around and I would just look at their expression before the judge is saying, Sheila, you've been given 10, 15 years for this heinous crime. That's where I used to get my gratification from. So it's, yeah. Talk is making me miss it now.
It's one of the things, though, isn't it? As you were saying, back as a child, our parents do their best to teach us morals. The morals that when you go to a shop, if you want something, you have to pay for it. And as we go through life, instead of being in the sweet shop, we're in the clothes shop or the shoe shop or hi-fi or whatever, you're into. We have the choice, and relying on those morals. If I want that new microphone for my podcast, I've got to pay for it. Have they got the money for it? If not, I can't have it. I'll have to wait for it. But we're making those decisions in our brain all the time, every single day. We are processing that information that we were given from a very young age. Other people, like shoplifters, for example, whether it's they are being primed to go and commit that error by somebody else, or whether it is an opportunist or whatever, we've all got to process the same information. 99% of us remember what our parents said. No, if it's on display, doesn't mean you take it. It's on display for you to select, and then you go and pay for it. But as you say, it's the background of those people that go into shoplifting, go into organised crime. There's always a story behind it.
Yeah, and you're right. And here's something that I would say. I'm going to be brave and throw this out here now. And some of your listeners might say, this former detective is crazy. But, I've lived in America, I've lived in the UK, and traveled to like 30 countries. I say this from a good place. I don't fully believe that full incarceration is the answer, because what you see is cycles of brokenness and patterns carrying on. And what a lot of these people need is education. They need social skills. They need to be taught what's right or wrong. Is it nature versus nurture, some of these arguments? But most of the people you see within the criminal justice system are there because, like I said, that Melvin Young saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Talking to Michael Long, no one had ever placed faith in him, and he couldn't believe that I would trust him so much to meet me. So I think, yes, when someone commits heinous crimes, you've got to incarcerate them because you run out of limited options. But what I would say is that I think as a society, we've got to look at, there's got to be other ways to rehabilitate these people. And most of the people in the criminal justice system, are sort of young teenagers. They need support, life skills and guidance. And looking as to where law enforcement is today, Sheila, you are a social worker, you're a nurse, you're a police officer, you're corrections, you're anything that no one else wants to do gets dumped on the police. There's someone with mental illness. Well, what's wrong with them? If they commit a crime, well, no, call a police officer around. And this was there's always different challenges where you're dumped on. I think with society, we've all got to look as to, well, what is the answer here? What should we really be doing with people? How do we help them? Not enough time is spent on helping these people. It's just a repetitive cycle. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole podcast discussion in itself, as in how can we take that forward. I don't know whether you remember when you were a kid, there used to be a Saturday TV programme called Dixon of Dock Green.
Yes, I was a little bit young for it, but I've heard of the show.
Well, at the end of the show, there was an English actor called Jack Warner, and at the end of the show, the police always got the criminal, locked him away, and they always got their man. And he used to come on at the end wearing the old-fashioned police helmet, and he would stand there and say some comment about, "We are there to protect you." I wish before this podcast that I had looked to see exactly what his words are. I'm sure it's a clip on YouTube. So Simon, really, just to finish this podcast, what would you like to say to wrap this conversation up? Because it's been absolutely fascinating, and I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Sheila, first off, for inviting me. It's been a real honour and privilege to talk to you and go over some very, interesting and complex subjects, for sure. And I think just what I would end up by saying is that, we're in a time, no matter where you live in the world, that police officers are under fire. And I think we often lose sight of the fact that these are people that are very underpaid and are putting their lives in danger every day for the good of society. And they do it not for the praise of the public, because they do it because it's the right thing to do. And I think sometimes I would just ask anyone, whether it's your listeners or where you are in the world, is just acknowledge that as to what would truly happen if we didn't have police officers that put themselves or put others before themselves every day. There would be anarchy on the streets, and I can tell you I've done it for a long time. That is exactly what would happen. So that would be my final word is I hope we can get our faith back in those people that are making daily sacrifices to serve and protect, to keep us safe.
So I have to say, here in Spain, we have several levels of police. We have the local police, we have the Nacional, and we have the Guardia. We all say in Spain, we have the most handsome police that we have ever seen. It's obviously a requirement in Spain. You've got to be incredibly handsome.
Oh, there you go. Maybe that's one of their chip boxes on their checklist.
You never know. I'll have to ask. Well, Simon, it's been an absolutely brilliant conversation. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you very much for taking us on your journey.
Well, thank you, Sheila, and I hope we meet again. You have a good day over there.
Thank you. Take care now. Bye-bye. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget, if you have a story you would like to tell, please get in touch. My email address is allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and thank you for listening.